Hello and welcome to Season 3, Episode 21 of Logicast, the AWS News podcast brought to you by Logicata. I'm Karl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata, and I'm joined today, as always, by my colleague, lead cloud engineer, John Goodall. How are you doing today, John?
I'm feeling very nostalgic today. I'm wearing get it in shot. I'm wearing that. It's reversed on the camera, I think, but I'm wearing that from where we met all those many years ago.
Isn't
Company
that
that doesn't
lovely? Is
exist
that why you put
anymore.
it? You should have told me, and I'd have dug my one out.
I might have some of the old brand ones too. I've still got the blue one somewhere.
They did do a lot of T-shirts in that place that no longer exists. Did you enjoy your week off?
Yeah, mixed bag.
Yeah.
Mostly it was all right.
Good. Yeah, I've also had a week off.
Yes, you were looking at motorcycles, weren't you?
I have been to the Isle of Man on my motorcycle to watch other people on their motorcycles. Lots of motorcycles in the Isle of Man at the moment, as the Isle of Man TT races that are on. For those listeners, maybe some will have heard of it, some won't. But what I will say is Brad Pitt and Channing Tatum were on the Isle of Man, and they are putting together a docu-series by the guys that did Formula One Drive to Survive, all about the Isle of Man TT. So if you haven't heard about it, you may well hear about it next year when that new docu-series comes out. And I definitely recommend watching it because those guys
Is Channing
are
Tatum
crazy.
keeping his clothes on?
I would imagine so. Probably donning some motorbike leathers, I would have thought, but
because he's rather more famous for certain other films where he doesn't.
Magic Mike, yes, Magic Mike, yes. So yeah, absolutely. Anyway, we're not here to talk about films about male strippers and everything else. We're here to talk about AWS news, and we are joined by a very special guest today, Darya Petrashka. How are you doing today, Darya?
Hi everyone. I'm good, thank you.
Great. Tell us a bit about yourself, where you come from, what you do for a living.
Yeah, sure. I'm a data scientist working at a company called SLP. It's oil and gas company, and I live in Poland now, but originally I'm from Belarus. And yeah, it's worth saying that I love AWS, and I'm an AWS community builder in machine learning category. And I'm trying to be active within community. So I occasionally write blog posts, also do public speaking. So yeah, and just interacting on social media with other builders and enjoy.
Nice. What year are you in the Community Builder program?
I started in 2022. So it's almost...
You're a year 3 then.
Yeah, yes, 3. It's a little bit tricky, but I will get my swag with year number 3 this year.
So I also started in 2022, but then the program decided they didn't want me back for 2023, so I reapplied, and then so I've been a year 1 twice, and now I'm going into year 2. But it was actually my 3rd year, so I won't be getting year 3 swag. I'll be getting year 2 swag, hopefully.
Did you get held back in school too?
No, I was never held back in school, but my education performance has tapered off over time as I've got older. So it was about time I got held back in something, I suppose. Just managed to scrape through school and university, but not through the AWS Community Builder program. I had to try harder. That's what my teachers always said to my parents. He must try harder. Could do better if he applied himself. So I've applied myself to the AWS Community Builder program, and here we are. Yeah. And John, you're going into your 2nd year as well, aren't you? I think so.
Yeah.
Cool.
I was only a first year once though.
Yeah. Well,
is that better? I don't know. I've got less swag. Like I've only got 1 hat.
Yeah, I got 2 hats, 2 cups. Yeah. So that's good, and if I can stay in the program, then hopefully I'll get some more. But anyway, we're not here to talk about swag and the AWS Community Builder program, even though we are all AWS community builders. We do a lot, yeah, because we like swag and we are AWS community builders. So, it's good to talk about it. It's good to promote it. We are here to talk about AWS news. So regular listeners to the podcast will know that every week I curate a list of AWS news that I share via my weekly AWS News Roundup newsletter. Then John and I pick a subset of the articles from the newsletter that we'd like to talk about on the podcast with our guests. So we do have such a selection of articles for you this week. And the first one, not really an article, more just a feature announcement on the AWS website. And this one is all about application load balancer launching IPv6 only support for internet clients. So, John, I think you chose this article. So are you excited about this one?
Firmly mixed. There we go. Right, moving on. No, okay. So this is part of the long-running move away from IPv4 to IPv6 because we've long run out of IPv4 and they're just getting expensive now because AWS and everybody else is trying to say stop using them, use IPv6 because the range of addresses is significantly bigger, right? Rather than your 4-octet 20, how many bit it is or whatever it is. It's then like a 64-bit address. Okay, cool. This, however, is a little bit confusing. So IPv6 only load balancers, on the face of it, is a good thing, primarily because if you had an IPv4 address on your load balancer, as of February this year, I think it was, you paid for it. Previously, you didn't. Now you pay. It's about $4 a month. Not a huge amount, but if you've got lots and lots and lots of load balancers, it starts to get expensive quite quickly, and there was nothing really you could do about it. Then they created dual stack, and that was a little while ago, and that would have IPv4 public facing and IPv6 public facing, and clients could connect to whichever. Great, love that, excellent. Now there's IPv6 only, which doesn't have IPv4. On the face of it, that's brilliant. Okay, however, large parts of the internet, older clients particularly, most modern browsers are okay, but large parts of the internet can't work with IPv6 still. So it's kind of cart before the horse a little bit. And AWS has just done this in every single facet of the IPv6 migration, I think. They put the cart before the horse again and again and again and again and again. This is the only time, however, I'm not annoyed at them for doing it. I was quite annoyed about charging for IPv4 because that's like, well, all you're going to do, the people that really need to migrate out of this, they're $4 a month per IP. They're not going to care. It's going to be a small line item on the bill. They're not going to care. And the people that this is going to hurt is going to be the small people that can't do anything about it for particular reasons. So that annoyed me. This doesn't annoy me, but I'm not overly excited about it, put it that way, because again, the people that should be getting off of IPv4 and onto IPv6 only, the small time dev shops, will need to keep running in IPv4 anyway, because they cannot risk the traffic from the segment of the internet that can't use IPv6, which is bigger than you'd think it is. The reality of this is useful if you can control where your traffic is coming from. So again, it's good for enterprise because lots of internal tools that are actually web facing and you control them that way. That's where this is going to really help because it's going to drive that bill down. And that's okay. Like that. That's fine. The only other thing I can think of where this is useful for everybody, and this is admittedly a setup that people should be using, is if you've got CloudFront talking to load balancer. Load balancer is IPv6 only. CloudFront can talk to it, as far as I understand it. That's fine. Okay, you saved yourself a few quid there, but it's not groundbreaking, really. It's like I think I'd have been less annoyed about the charge for IPv4 if this had come first, but it just feels disjointed.
Any thoughts? Anything to add there, Darya?
Yeah, I agree with John, and I also noticed that gap between like charging for IPv4 addresses and then like how much time passed, maybe a few months, and then this feature appeared. So yeah, kind of leads me to a question: why there is a gap? And in general, like I would like to see where this transition to IPv6 journey would lead to, when we would move like completely to IP version 6 completely. I don't know.
Never.
Never.
Never. IPv4 will not die. I mean, I have an outward-facing IPv4 address on my home broadband. I paid a little while ago for a static IP, and that's just kind of what I've got. But, it will never die.
Do you get an IPv6 as well?
No.
So
Can
you
you?
I
can
don't think
have
that affects. I don't think that affects my ability to connect to things on IPv6, but it would certainly prevent me from running things, in my house IPv6 only. So it's the same sort of scenario. IPv4 will never die ever, because what you've got to bear in mind as well is it's not IPv6 inside the VPC. That's still IPv4, and I think it will be forever.
it's
But
by
can't
the
you?
way a good quote for your T-shirt. IPv4 will never die.
Yeah, definitely. You heard it here first. That's a Logicast original
COBOL still
quote.
hasn't died.
This is true. Yeah, there's going to be some very expensive IPv4 engineers in about 50 years' time when most of them have died, and there's still only a few guys left that actually know how it works. So get your network exams, study for those now. But can you not create an IPv6 only VPC?
Not as far as I'm aware.
Mm.
I mean, what would be the advantage? Because you don't pay for the internal IPv4. You don't pay for it.
Yeah. So I suppose it just overcomplicates things for people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So IPv4 will never die. You heard it here first. On that note, let's move on to our second article for this week. See if we can come up with another amazing quote about optimizing storage costs and query performance by compacting small objects.
I mean,
and
S3 will never die either. So,
well, it has 11 nines durability. So, so one would hope it doesn't. But I think this is all about log files, John. Correct me if I'm wrong. So all about optimizing the storage of your log files to optimize costs. Tell us more.
This is incredibly dull, but actually not very niche. It's one of those ones that everybody needs to think about if they're generating log files, because everyone should be generating log files. Right. But get that out of the way to start with.
And storing them.
Yes. If you're just creating
not
them,
just
throwing them
generating
away, what's
them.
the point?
Yeah.
Everybody should be logging as much as possible where relevant and storing it and doing analysis on it and kind of all the rest of it. Right. That's the elevator pitch out of the way. S3 has a problem when it comes to log file storage. It will store them quite happily, but lots of log files generated by AWS managed services, that's what I'm looking for, are quite small. They're quite small. So if you look at Lambda logs in CloudWatch logs, and if you export them to S3, they'll be in really tiny files. If you look at load balancer logs or CloudFront logs or whatever, they tend to be lots and lots and lots of log files that are really very small. And you think, well, okay, fine, lots of small files, don't really care. You start to care when you start to care about long-term retention. You think, okay, well, how do you deal with making your S3 storage cheaper over long term? Turn on intelligent tiering, look at things like Glacier. Great. Most of those have a minimum file size. The minimum file size for intelligent tiering, as the article alludes to, is 128 kilobytes. Any smaller than that, and it will just stay in the frequent access tier, and you'll get charged the 2 and a bit p per gigabyte. You think, okay, well, how much is that? After a while, it gets a lot. It does. It gets to be quite a lot. So what this article is doing is it's kind of showing you a way and a reason that you should look at compacting your log files. And I mean compacting, not compressing, because compressing a text file, whilst it's very efficient, what you'll end up with is lots of even smaller files. So what would kind of be the point? What this is doing is it's kind of saying that you should look at writing a Lambda, and they may or may not supply one, that takes those files and sort of merges them all together. So you've just got smaller numbers of larger files. This does two really interesting things. The first, which is the obvious one, is it means that intelligent tiering can be more effective, because it's then going to start taking those files into its scope, and it's going to be moving them through the various storage tiers and saving you money. Brilliant. We like that. The next thing that I hadn't considered when I looked at the headline for this one is it makes Athena queries faster. It's querying the same amount of data, but because it's not opening and closing so many files, it's doing it much faster. Obviously, that makes sense when you think about it logically, but I hadn't considered that. So that's quite nice as well. I mean, the data that they've got here is saying that in the uncompressed form, the runtime was 15 and a bit seconds for 1.2 gig, and in its compressed form, it was about 6 seconds for the same amount of data. So that's really interesting, because the biggest bugbear I've had with Athena, particularly looking at things like CloudFront and WAF logs and those sorts of things, is it takes ages to do anything with the log files as they're produced because they're already in gzip. So you're not really going to compress them any further. And it's looking at them in that gzip format, opening them, reading the data, closing them, opening the next one, reading the data, closing them. And because there's thousands and thousands of files over several days, it takes eons to do anything. However, if you have a large number of smaller files, it's not opening, closing quite so many files, it's just running faster, which is brilliant.
Thoughts on this one, Darya?
I like the article. Yeah, and I like that they compared the numbers on, like, first they explained what's the difference between what options we have. We have option to compact or to compress. What's the difference between them? What are use cases? What is storage cost difference, query performance difference? Also, like, they try to estimate the efforts on doing this compaction, yeah, using step functions. One thing I would like to have here is to have the explanation when that would be efficient and when not. They kind of mention it there. So when you have few files per partition, it may be not so efficient, but what's the threshold? How to understand whether, like, okay, logically, if I have, for example, 5 files per partition, maybe it's not going to be too efficient, but how to determine it and decide where is this threshold, where should I run it?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a reasonable request.
Yeah, it depends on the level of logs that you're providing, that you're creating, I suppose. Because if you look at something like an ALB, it creates, I think, one file for every like 10 minutes of the day. But then if it's not a particularly busy site, there could not be a lot in any of them. And you'll still end up with less than 128K for the whole day. And then you end up kind of rolling it up and rolling it up and rolling it up. It's like, I've now got one file, but it's for a whole week. Is that really what I should have done? Maybe, maybe not. So yeah, it's an interesting point.
Before we move on to the next article, I felt I ought to just apologise to Thomas Moore, who is one of the authors of this article, because when we first shared it on our social channels, we tagged the wrong Thomas Moore. Fortunately, the wrong Thomas Moore was honest and told us that he was not the author of this article, so we were able to remove that tag and tag the right Thomas Moore. But Thomas Moore, if you're listening, I do apologise. We got the wrong Thomas Moore.
We'll try and tag you correctly when we put the podcast out.
Yeah, I must mention that actually to Alicia before it goes out. Otherwise, I'm out tagging the wrong Thomas Moore again, and he might not be so honest second time around. Anyway, on that note, let's move on to our next article this week. And we're back onto the subject of AI. We can't seem to escape it at the moment. It is everywhere, and it's on every episode now. This is one of the latest models to be released into Amazon Bedrock, and it's the Mistral Small Foundation model, which is now available in Amazon Bedrock. Obviously, some of the other models were already available, some of the other Mistral models. But Darya, I know this is your area, so I'm going to come to you first on this one. Do you have some experience with the Mistral models on Bedrock yet?
I do have experience with Mistral, but not on Bedrock. So okay. I played with Mistral from a Hugging Face hub. And yeah, in general, I like it. And that's why I picked up this article, because I'm excited of the appearance of like enlargement of Mistral family in Bedrock. But here, I wanted also to to think a little bit more about the use case. Yeah, because as name suggests, Mistral Small, it should be something like very, very fast or fast deployable, or maybe for small tasks. So, and I also thought initially that it would be cheaper because, okay, I have small task, I can run it smoothly and faster, and I would pay less. But it turns out that it wasn't the case. And yeah, interestingly, because Mistral Small is only on Bedrock is cheaper than Mistral Large only. So we have also Mistral 7B, and we also have Mistral 8x7B, and they are cheaper than Mistral Small. So I was wondering what would be use case for Mistral Small, and it should deal better with some kind of bulk tasks. Like, for example, document classification, when you have a lot of documents and you want to classify whether they are spam or not. But in my opinion, other Mistral family models in Bedrock, like 7B, should be also dealing with this case. The only thing here that Mistral Small could be beneficial, maybe its performance, so it can reply faster, and maybe it would be less chattable, because Mistral, as for Mistral 7B, it's tend to provide like more than you expect it to. And this is not exactly what you want when it comes to simple tasks like classification. So yeah, it just I sometimes I just wonder, why won't we keep a simple table and just one model per use case, and not like expanding this to, like every like company tries to build its own model, and their use
That's
case are kind of,
capitalism.
yeah.
Yeah, I noticed you muted me, Carl. Apologies for the noise. I was just looking at the pricing for Mistral AI models, and it's mad. Small and large, obviously small is cheaper than large by a factor of 8 at the per in 1,000 input tokens. Cool. But then yeah, 7B and 8x7B are significantly cheaper. And I'm not an AI expert by any measure, but I couldn't tell you the difference between them. Like, okay, fine. And then you look at the various other models that are available, and the announcement says that Mistral Small is for, what does it say? It's for high volume, low latency, language based tasks. Does RAG. Cool. I'm sure lots of other models claim similar things. Maybe not from Mistral. I'm sure the Titan models can do similar things. I'm sure there's something from AI 21 Labs. I don't know. It's not my area. And model evaluation is obviously an enormous part of doing any sort of AI project. But as you say, it's just getting a bit ridiculous now. It's which model do I want? Well, this one is 1% better for that task and 1% worse for that task. And okay, I get the point that you won't have one model to rule them all, Lord of the Rings style, and you need to pick different ones for different things. Fine, but a little more genericism would be nice.
Maybe that will come over time. Bit of consolidation, just getting all the models out there at the moment, and there will be some consolidation. But yeah, a nice table to visualize it, Darya. Perhaps that's a future blog post idea for you, since that's your area. Nice high level model summary across all the different model vendors. What's good for what. But I don't have a lot to add on this one, but I would say that just because something's small doesn't mean it can't be expensive. I mean, think of diamonds. They're pretty small. They're very expensive. So
I thought you were talking
small,
about
medium,
then,
large.
Carl.
I'm a diamond in the rough myself. So
Small and expensive.
I'm not that small. Getting bigger at the moment. I think I've just been on holiday. So anyway, yeah. On that note, let's move along. Oh, sorry, go on.
I just want to add this one as well. This is following the same annoying rollout pattern, the same gripe I have with Bedrock and models generally, is Mistral have 4 models available, but only in North Virginia. In the other regions where Bedrock is available, Small is not available. So it's only in North Virginia. It's not in any of the other regions. And this is just no end of annoyance for me, because, okay, fine, run it in North Virginia, whatever. There might be compliance reasons where you can't, and then you're just locked out of using this model. And it's just no end of annoying for me.
Yeah, we've certainly seen that within our customer base, customers wanting to use specific models and who are unable to do so because of the locations in which they're available. I'm sure eventually that they will all proliferate around the various different regions, and it'll probably be the usual case of supply and demand. If somebody's got a big requirement for it in a certain area, then AWS will prioritize those areas first. But yeah, I think it's certainly the geographic rollout is hampering adoption of Bedrock in certain areas. because of the data residency and compliance concerns that you highlighted there, John. So I've only seen it in one example, so whether that's an isolated example or not, I suspect it probably isn't. I suspect they're not the only organization that has those strict compliance requirements and would like to use these models. And what they've done is just ended up running it themselves, or running up GPU instances and running the model themselves rather than running it through Bedrock, which kind of goes against the whole pitch for Bedrock. But hopefully over time it will catch up, and that rollout will become more ubiquitous. Anyway, on that note, let's move along to our next article for this week. There's some big words in this one, so I'm going to have to make sure my teeth are in properly before I try and say the title of this article. But this one is announcing so I've coughed before I even tried to say it. This one is announcing LlamaIndex support for Amazon Neptune to build GraphRAG applications. I think I said that correctly. Again, Darya, this is one that you've chosen. So there's a whole bunch of things in there that I have no clue what they are. Like LlamaIndex and GraphRAG. I've heard of Neptune before. I know what that is. But enlighten us. Tell us a bit more about this, Darya.
Yeah, sure. So why I picked up this news? I got excited about it because LlamaIndex is a popular open source tool to work with GraphIndex. And about graph knowledge, I think it is what can make the model things more like we human, because we as human, we tend to think in categories and trying to align, for example, places and people, not just in a table, but in structure like nodes, and trying to connect these nodes in order to build like our knowledge map, our network map. Yeah, think about connections on social media or organizational structure, right? So this support is okay, we already had this knowledge graph functionality on Neptune on AWS, and this was great. But now we have an open source tool that can provide us, like, facilitate our interaction with the Neptune graph knowledge vectors or knowledge bases, and we can efficiently query it with large language model. Just query with a natural language and ask, okay, with all they were mentioned an example, and I found it very interesting. For example, me as a company, I work with different suppliers, and I don't want to, spend all the day on the internet and trying to catch up what's going on with all these companies. So I can just ask my model to do this instead of me. And also, I was thinking about one example. So like every organization has a structure, some managers, some employees, and this would be very interesting in terms of, for example, like a HR department trying to, gain some insights on the people structure, and also can be queried via natural language. So yeah.
Cool. Thumbs up for that. Anything to add, John?
Oh, yeah, I've done a little bit with graph databases, Neo4j mostly. Anything that prevents me from having to write cipher queries, I'm all for.
Can you ask a model to write a cipher query for you?
I mean, probably. Honestly, It's not terrible. It's like SQL, but not really. The point with a graph database primarily is, rather than storing columns and lists of attributes about things, it's much more of a storing relationships between things. Social media is a good example because that's kind of what Facebook is built on top of. It's a big graph database that sits under the covers. So yeah, more better. No complaints.
Cool. Well, on that note, let's move on to our final article for this week. And this one, we have spoken about it briefly, I think, on the podcast before. It's the change of leadership right at the very top of AWS. But this is a particular analysis piece on what impact the change of CEO to Matt. Well, Adam Slipsky's on his way out. Matt Garman is on his way in to take the helm at AWS. And this article is questioning what impact that might have on the AI future of AWS. So, John, I'm going to come to you first on this one to mix things up a bit.
Oh, shocking. It's interesting because I've seen a little bit of noise that says that maybe Slipsky missed the boat on the AI stuff, and that's part of why he's been removed. This is all incredibly conjecture. This is all rumor mill territory. Obviously, none of it's substantiated. But if that's true, then interesting, because one of the critiques I've seen of Matt Garman is that he does need to brush up on his AI, and it's not his area. His area is much more of the sort of traditional compute and kind of all of that, which I don't personally see a problem with, because did AWS miss the boat on this? Maybe, maybe not. They certainly made a lot of noise to pretend that they didn't, even though they kind of did. But it's not their core competency. Their core competency, in my opinion, I think they do better than anybody else, is compute. They do compute better than everybody else. They've done it for longer. They did serverless first by a long way. And going away from the AI side of things, maybe a little, probably wouldn't hurt. I mean, it would certainly not hurt my sanity, because the noise mill might slow down a little bit. But yeah, don't know. Honestly, I'm not sure that any change at the top is going to have an immediate effect on what we're seeing, but maybe in a year's time we'll come back to this and go, oh yeah, they're not doing so much AI, or they're not making so much noise about it, or they've done this other cool thing here and then making more noise about that.
Yeah, from my perspective, obviously AI has outlined this 3-tier AI strategy where they've got the infrastructure for running models. They've got Bedrock for democratized access to models. And then obviously they've got some of the applications sitting on top like Q, etc. And some of the analysis I've read, they've spoken about AWS always being the platform on which people can build. And I guess the things at the top of that stack, the applications, etc., is not really a platform for people to build on, whereas the, AI optimized EC2 instances or machine learning optimized EC2 instances, and maybe Bedrock to some extent, does kind of fit in with that core strategy. So yeah, I'd be interested to see whether that whole 3-tier thing shakes out a little bit and perhaps the tiers reduce or change. What are your thoughts, Darya?
Regarding the article, I just feel that it goes with a strong assumption that AI will drive cloud, but I don't know whether it's true or not, whether like this hype will end maybe this year or next year. I don't know. So it's just a huge assumption which can be true, cannot be true. And out of this assumption, then, okay, we need to force AI and then like see a change. I feel like they try to combine all these events all together and try to like, do a little bit of hype and then just to think about what would it bring. Yeah, I also think it wouldn't change something drastically. So yeah.
Might be drawing conclusions that aren't there. Then yeah.
Indeed. Only time will tell, I guess. I think is he in post yet? I don't know if the change has happened, but if he is in post, he's only been for a couple of weeks. So, but certainly got some people fired up for reInvent this year to see what the CEO's keynote might look like and how that might differ from previous years. So we'll have to wait until November to find that out, but let's wait and see how this moves on.
It's going to ruin everyone's blog post templates.
And I will need to take one more selfie, like.
Oh, we take loads of selfies. That's fine. Sure. One more
with
selfie.
With the current CEO of AWS.
Oh, you managed to get a selfie with Adam Slipsky, did you? At reInvent.
Yes.
Ah,
that's why I was. Oh no.
Yeah, it's old news now. Yeah, but it's vintage. It's classic. Yeah.
You've just got to walk up to him and say, "Look, I've got one of the previous guy. You can't miss out. Come on."
But you could always just create one with AI. On that note, we have reached the end of our time for season 3, episode 21 of Logicast. So if you're still listening, thank you for listening right to the end. We will be back next week with another episode for you. Thank you, John, as always, for your insights. And thank you very much, Darya, for joining us today and sharing your insights about AI, ML, etc. with us. It's been great to have you on as our guest. We are available on all major podcast distribution platforms. So if you enjoyed it, tell your friends. If you want to see what we look like while we're talking to you, we're also available on YouTube. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again next time.